I had just thrown the first handful of dirt onto my husband's coffin when Anna, my daughter-in-law, suddenly screamed in the middle of the crowd. "The person in the coffin is fake! He's not dead!" Her scream tore through the silence of the funeral. Everyone turned to look at me, and I felt my knees give way. Anna trembled as she pulled me back, leaned close to my ear, and whispered, "They're lying to you. They're watching. Don't trust your two daughters." My whole world collapsed. And at that very moment, the truth began to rise. My name is Eleanor Blake, 68 years old. What I'm about to tell you changed my life forever. There was a time I believed that nothing in this world could shake me more than seeing the man I loved lying in a coffin. But on that March morning, when the phone rang through the empty kitchen, I realized that true pain doesn't come from the death of a husband. It comes from betrayal, wearing the face of your own blood. That morning, the Oregon sky was gray, the trees behind the house shivering in the cold wind. I was making coffee when the landline rang, and a dry, unfamiliar voice said, "Mrs. Blake, I'm calling from your husband's workshop. There's been an explosion. Please come immediately." I don't remember how I ran out of the house. The road to the workshop was only 10 minutes long, but when I arrived, the smell of burning still hung in the air. A yellow tape stretched across the gate, and firefighters were collecting blackened debris. "We're very sorry, Mrs. Blake," the fire chief said, his voice low. "The man inside the workshop didn't make it." I collapsed. Everything turned into a dull, buzzing sound. My gray hair clung to my sweaty forehead. My hands trembled as they handed me a half-burned wallet. Inside was an old wedding photo of Arthur smiling, his arm around my shoulder. I had no doubt. The man in that workshop was my husband. The funeral arrangements happened too fast, too perfect. My two daughters, Diana and Lydia, took control of everything in just one day. They talked to the hospital, signed the death certificate, contacted the funeral home, chose the coffin, and even arranged the tombstone. Everything felt pre-planned. "Mom, you don't have to worry about anything," Diana said calmly, almost coldly. "We'll handle it all. You should rest." Those words made me shiver, because in all my memories, Diana had never known how to take care of anyone but herself. And Lydia, my frail youngest, just nodded along. She couldn't even look me in the eye. "Mom, we just want everything to be peaceful," Lydia murmured, "so Dad can rest." Peaceful. The word rang like a lie. 3 days later, the coffin was brought to Spring Valley Funeral Home. I sat before Arthur's portrait, the candlelight reflecting his gentle face. The man who had spent over 40 years in that workshop, who never once raised his voice at me. And now he lay inside a dark wooden coffin with the lid sealed shut. "We chose this type because the body wasn't intact, Mom," Diana said, her tone clipped and administrative. I only nodded, my chest heavy as stone. But deep down, something didn't add up. Arthur had always been meticulous with his machines. He always shut off the power, checked the gauges, and paid attention to every tiny detail. He couldn't have died from an explosion. That night, I sat alone in the bedroom. Outside, The wind howled through the yard, and on the table, the phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It read only 4 words. "I'm alive, Eleanor." I shot to my feet. My pulse raced. My hand shook as I typed back. "Who is this? Don't joke like that. Who has my husband's phone?" The second message came less than 10 seconds later. "Don't tell the girls. They're watching." My heart stopped. I read the words over and over, my throat dry. No one, except Arthur, ever referred to our daughters as the girls. He always said, "Are the girls home yet?" whenever he waited for them at dinner. But if it really was him, then who was in that coffin? The day of the funeral, the sky was shrouded in gray clouds. The guests were few. A handful of old neighbors, the local shopkeeper, and my eldest son Michael with his wife, Anna. I noticed Anna was silent the entire time. She sat in the last row, pale-faced, eyes fixed on the closed coffin. Michael placed his hand on her shoulder, but she pulled away, visibly tense. When the pastor began the final words, I felt something tighten in the air. Diana stood beside me, her face composed, her eyes dry. Lydia clutched her handkerchief, but I noticed her fingers trembling. Then, just as everyone prepared to throw the first handful of dirt onto the grave, Anna suddenly screamed, "Stop! Don't close it! The person in that coffin is fake!" The cemetery fell silent. I turned, my heart pounding. Anna rushed toward the coffin, her voice breaking. "That's not Arthur! He's alive! They lied!" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Diana shouted, "Anna, have you lost your mind?" But Anna didn't back down. Her face was wet with tears, her voice shaking but firm. "Your husband is alive, Mrs. Blake. I helped him hide. They tried to kill him." Her words cut through me like a blade. I turned to my daughters and saw the panic in their eyes. Diana stepped forward, her voice rising. "What are you talking about?" "The truth," Anna said steadily. "Arthur didn't die in an explosion. He was poisoned." The air grew thick. The pastor froze. People whispered. I felt the ground beneath me crack open. "Poisoned?" I whispered. Who would do that?" Anna looked at me, her tearful eyes glistening. "Your daughters, Mrs. Blake. They poisoned him." Chaos erupted. Diana shouted that Anna was mentally unstable. Lydia sobbed, and Michael tried to drag his wife away from the crowd. I just stood there, motionless, as my husband's coffin was carried away amid the howling wind and the pounding of my heart. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the old messages and reread every word from the unknown sender. The man I now knew was Arthur. "Don't trust the girls." Never in my life did I imagine hearing such a warning about my own children. I thought back to the years gone by. Diana, sharp and ambitious, and Lydia, weak and easily swayed. When my father chose Michael as the successor and gave him most of the inheritance because he was the one who cared for the family, I remembered how Diana's eyes darkened. Arthur once told me, "Diana doesn't understand that happiness doesn't come from what we own, but from what we can hold onto in our hearts." But perhaps he was wrong. That night, I called Anna. She answered after the second ring, her voice trembling. "He's safe, Mrs. Blake. Arthur's alive. I sat still, gripping the receiver tightly. How, how is that possible? They mixed methanol into his coffee. But Michael noticed something was off. So I helped Arthur escape to a small cabin near the coast where a friend of mine lives. We staged the death using an unclaimed body from the morgue. I couldn't speak. Every memory from the funeral came flooding back. The false embraces, the forced tears of my daughters, the perfection of it all. Arthur was alive. But that also meant my daughters had tried to kill their father. When I hung up the phone, the rain had started outside. The raindrops hit the window, heavy and rhythmic like a heartbeat. In the dark, I sat silently for a long time. I didn't cry. I only felt an empty space spreading inside me, the place where a mother's love and trust used to be. That day, I understood that death isn't the end of a life. It's the beginning of truth. And truth, no matter how painful, had finally begun to rise, demanding justice for the man I once thought I had lost forever. The next day, the town began to buzz. Rumors spread faster than I expected that my daughter-in-law had gone mad at Arthur Blake's funeral, and that I, a grieving old woman, was delusional. I did not go outside for 3 days. The old wooden door remained locked, the curtains drawn, only dim light seeping through a narrow gap. In that darkness, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and the local paper with its cold printed line. Explosion at Blake Mechanical Workshop. Preliminary conclusion: mechanical accident. No one mentioned methanol. No one spoke of anything unusual. Only I carried the small blaze of doubt in my chest. I tried to call Anna, but the line was busy. Michael said his wife was resting because she was exhausted from the funeral. I knew that was not true. I knew Anna was being held back, or at least being forced to stay silent. That afternoon, Diana came to the house. She knocked 3 times, light and precise, like someone used to controlling everything. I opened the door. "Mother," she said softly, but her eyes were cold. "We are taking care of you. You are not eating, not sleeping, and it seems you are losing your grip." I stood motionless, my hands gripping the chair rail. "I am perfectly clear-headed, Diana. And what about those messages? Did you tell someone that your husband is still alive?" she asked. I looked at her for a long moment. "Because he's alive, dear." Diana laughed, a short, dry, indifferent sound. "Mother, your father is dead. We saw the body ourselves." "That body was fake," I said slowly. "Anna told the truth." Diana's face changed for a second. Then she quickly recovered her composure. "Anna is having psychological problems, Mother. She is in shock from your father's death and imagining things. Michael has taken her for treatment." My heart pounded. Treatment? At Dr. Moore's private center. A very good place. They also have programs for older adults, for those having memory or emotional difficulties. I immediately understood the implication behind her words. Diana did not come to comfort me. She came to probe and to prepare the ground. "Are you saying I'm losing my mind?" I asked. "No, Mother, you misunderstand," she said with a faint smile. "We only think you should be cared for better. This house is cold and lonely with no one beside you. At that center, you will have someone to talk to. Nurses, doctors. You will feel better. I looked straight into my daughter's eyes, the same eyes I used to lull to sleep with fairy tales. Now I saw only a cold steel glint. "You intend to put me in a psychiatric facility," I whispered. "Is that right, Diana?" Her smile did not waver. "If that is what is best for you, then perhaps yes." Then she turned away, leaving the house scented with expensive perfume and stained with the slick feeling of betrayal. That night, I heard a sound on the porch. A car had pulled up. I drew the curtain aside and saw Lydia standing there in a gray coat, clutching a wilted bouquet. She came in without looking at me. "Mother, I'm sorry. Diana went too far." "Did you know what your sister planned?" I asked. She fell silent. "I just want to know one thing, Lydia. Is Father's explosion real?" Lydia burst into tears. She trembled, her voice breaking. "I did not want this. I did not know they would go through with it," she stammered. "Go through with what?" I gripped her hands. "Tell me." She broke down into sobs and then collapsed onto the table. "Diana said it was just a way to speed up the insurance payout. She said Father would sign a new will, but if he would not agree, there would be other ways." "I thought it was only a threat, Mother. I did not think they would really do it," she cried out. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You helped them poison your father?" I asked. Lydia shook her head, choking on her tears. "I only made his coffee, but Diana told me it was vitamins. I did not know." "I did not know," she wailed. I stood stunned. My heart shattered into fragments. I held Lydia, not out of forgiveness, but for the last small warmth of a family falling apart in my arms. 2 days later, everything unfolded exactly as I had feared. Diana returned with a man in a black suit, Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist she had mentioned. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Blake," he said with a smooth voice. "We are only here for a general health check. Nothing serious." I looked at Diana. "You called a psychiatrist to my house?" I asked. "Do not misunderstand," she said with her practiced smile. "We are only concerned. Today, I also invited a lawyer to advise on the estate, to reassure you." The estate. And then I understood. If they could prove I was incompetent, then the entire inheritance, the house, the workshop, the land, would be placed under Diana and Lydia's control. Michael, my eldest son, whom Arthur trusted, would be cut out of the succession because Mother is not competent to manage the property. A complete plot. A trap prepared with chilling precision. Dr. Moore began to ask simple questions, as if following a rehearsed script. "Mrs. Blake, do you know what day it is today?" "Thursday," I answered. "Do you remember the date of your husband's death?" "He is not dead," I said. He smiled and made notes. "And who told you that?" "He did, by message, and my daughter-in-law confirmed it." He looked up with a hint of pity. "You believe that your husband messaged you after his death?" Diana sighed. "Mother is having hallucinations, doctor. Since the funeral, she has been talking to the deceased, hearing noises, thinking someone is following her." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "Enough." Dr. Moore rose. We will recommend a more thorough evaluation. You should rest." When they left, the house felt stripped of the last breath of freedom. I knew, if I did not act fast, in a few days, they would have enough evidence to place me in the care facility Diana had selected and bury me alive in there. That night, I found a small file in Arthur's old wooden cupboard where he kept insurance papers and business documents. Among the messy papers was a copy of a life insurance policy, increased 6 months ago, with the beneficiaries listed as Diana Blake and Lydia Blake. Michael's name was not on it. Everything became clear. They had planned this for a long time. Force father to sign a new policy, poison him, stage an explosion, then rush the funeral to collect the payout. And now, they wanted to put mother into the facility to seize the rest. I sat in the dim room, the paper trembling in my hands. All my life, I believed love could save everything. But love, placed in the wrong hands, is the sharpest weapon to destroy a person. 3 days later, I received a letter from the lawyer representing Diana. A friendly letter, cold and brazen. We propose that Mrs. Blake voluntarily transfer management of her estate to her daughter during treatment. This measure would ensure the family assets are managed properly and avoid legal risks. I smiled a bitter, dry smile. They wanted everything: the property, my dignity, and my reason. I looked out the window. The roses Arthur planted years ago had nearly all fallen, but inside me, something stirred. A small flame, slow but resolute. They thought I was an old woman to be led by the nose. But they forgot that I had lived my life beside a man who understood the danger of silence. Arthur used to say, "When someone tries to take away your voice, you must let the truth speak for you." I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Before sunrise, I would go to the only person who could help me, Detective Samuel Grant, Arthur's old friend, who had investigated many insurance fraud cases. If Arthur was alive, as Anna said, I would find him. And if my 2 daughters had truly killed their father, they would pay, not only for Arthur, but for the humiliation they had dealt to the soul of this mother. I never imagined the day would come when I would have to plan retaliation against my own children. But when a mother is pushed to her limit, and when the truth is buried under lies, silence itself becomes a crime. That night, I could not sleep. Outside, the wind lashed the porch roof and blew away the last rose branches. I sat under the dim lamp with a cup of cold tea and thought about a road with no turning back. Before dawn, I drove to the town police station, where Detective Samuel Grant still worked. He had been an old friend of Arthur, a quiet but fair man who had helped us deal with small workshop fires years ago. When I walked in, he looked up, surprise plain on his face. "Eleanor? I thought you were in mourning?" I tightened my handbag in my hand. "I came to talk about Arthur." "I'm very sorry, but that case has been closed." "No, he is not dead," I cut in. Samuel stared at me for a few seconds. Then he nodded and motioned me to sit. "Go on," he said. I told him everything from the messages, the funeral, Anna's words, to my daughters forcing me to sign over control of the estate. Samuel did not take notes. He only listened, his expression growing grave. When I finished, he spoke slowly. "If it is methanol, then this is not an accident, Eleanor. This is murder." "I know," I answered, my voice hoarse. "But I have no proof. I only have the truth and my fear." Samuel stood and paced to the window, looking out at the weak sunlight. "Arthur once told me he was having trouble with his 2 daughters about the insurance, the will, and fixing the shop." I told him to be careful. "Did he mention Anna by name?" I asked. "Yes. He said Anna was the only one he could trust if anything went wrong." My chest tightened. Arthur had prepared for the possibility of harm. Perhaps he left a clue somewhere. Samuel looked at me. "I cannot open a formal investigation on your word alone, but if you can take me to where Arthur is hiding, we can get real evidence." "I do not know where he is," I replied, "but Anna does." That afternoon, I went to Michael's house. The door was shut and the curtains drawn. I knocked several times before seeing a shape behind the frosted glass. Anna opened the door, her eyes ringed with dark circles, her face hollow but lighting up when she saw me. "Mrs. Blake," she said. "Where is Arthur?" I asked without preamble. She glanced around and pulled me inside. "He is safe, but I cannot tell you where. Michael sent him to a coastal house. Only he and I know. If Diana finds out, they will kill him." I grabbed Anna's hand, my voice trembling. "Thank you. You saved my husband." She shook her head. "No, I only did what was right. I could not stand by while they killed the man who raised them." She handed me an old phone containing several recorded files. Arthur suspected things long before. I helped him record conversations between him and Diana and Lydia. There are copies of the insurance contract they forced him to sign, and even part of Lydia's confession. I held the phone like a first piece of justice. "I know," Anna continued. "We cannot go to the police yet. Diana has ties to the insurance company and some council members. If they find out, we will lose everything." "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Collect more evidence. I have a friend at Memorial Hospital who can get Arthur's medical records, the ones that hide the real cause. You help me contact Detective Grant. Only with him will we be safe." 2 days later, I returned to Samuel. We sat in the old office where the smell of paper and coffee blended. I placed the phone on the desk, my hand trembling slightly. Samuel played the first recording. Arthur's voice came through, tired but clear. "Diana, I will not increase the insurance. We have enough, your mother and I. You must do it. This is a good opportunity. If anything happens, your mother will be safe." "Safe from who?" Arthur asked. From the silence in the recording, the room turned cold and still. Samuel stopped the file and looked at me. "This is circumstantial, but enough to start an investigation." "I have another," I said, and opened the second file. This time, it was Lydia's voice. "I cannot stand it. I keep dreaming about Father. He looks at me." "Shut up," Diana snapped. "It is done. Do not ruin the plan." Samuel nodded, his face heavy. "Eleanor, are you ready for what comes? When this breaks, those two will not stop." I looked out the window at the sky closing with gray clouds, as if rain was about to fall. "I have endured enough, Samuel. They took my husband, my honor, and tried to take my mind. I have nothing left to lose." That afternoon, Anna met me at the cafe near the bus station. The small place was quiet, with soft jazz and the smell of pastries. She set a thick envelope on the table. These are copies of the hospital records. Arthur was not admitted for burns from an explosion. He suffered temporary blindness, seizures, then coma, all consistent with methanol poisoning. But in the official report, the cause was changed to an industrial accident. I opened the file and saw Dr. Harold Moore's signature. I recognized the name immediately. He was the man Diana brought to my home pretending to be a psychiatrist. They bought him, I said, my voice flat. And he altered the diagnosis, Anna said. I have the authentic signature from the archive and a forged one. 2 different copies. We looked at each other. For the first time in weeks, I saw in Anna's eyes what I had been missing: belief. Tomorrow, I said, we will meet Samuel. He will know what to do. Anna nodded softly. I will take you to where Arthur is hiding. But be careful. Diana has put someone on you. I was not surprised. For 3 days, every time I left the house, I noticed a silver car parked across the street. The windows were dark and no faces were visible. That night, I did not return home. I stayed at Anna's place. When everything fell silent, she whispered, He asks about you every day. He fears for you. I turned to her. Anna, the cruelest thing for a mother is not betrayal itself, but realizing she raised those who can kill without batting an eye. She squeezed my hand, her voice low. But you still have children, and Michael, and Arthur, and justice. For the first time in many weeks, I smiled. A small smile. Tired, but true. The next morning, Anna drove me out of town. The coastal road rose out of the morning mist, cold and quiet. After more than an hour, she stopped in front of a wooden house, hidden in a stand of pines. The door opened. Arthur stood there, thinner, pale, but still him, the man I thought I had lost forever. I could not speak. We hugged until the world seemed to stop. The scent of wood, the salt air, and his breath blended together. You are alive, I whispered. Thanks to Anna, he replied, and to you, for believing what no one else would. I let go and looked into his eyes. What do we do now? I asked. Arthur turned to Anna. She told me everything. Samuel will help. But I do not want only to arrest them. I want the truth exposed so no one can call this a tragic accident. I took his hand, old but warm. We will do it together. That night, by the hearth, Arthur told the whole story. On the day of the supposed accident, he felt dizzy after drinking the coffee Lydia made. He collapsed and woke up in the hospital blind and with a dry mouth. I heard them talking about the insurance, he said quietly. Diana whispered to Lydia that once this is done, everything will be settled. And then, I asked, Anna found methanol in the coffee. She pretended to support the scheme and secretly informed Michael. They moved me in the night and used an unclaimed body from the morgue to fake my death. Without them, I would be dead. I looked at the man of my life with admiration and pain. They are our children, I said. No, Eleanor, he replied, his voice low. They were our children. Now they are killers. I cannot let them kill anyone else. I nodded. The flame in my heart flared. There was no room left for tears. From that moment, I knew the fight to reclaim justice had truly begun. The morning by the coast was very calm. The sea was still. Pale sunlight streamed through the window, falling across Arthur's gaunt face. I poured coffee, my hands still shaking as I listened to the distant sound of waves. Perhaps it was the first time I felt the warmth of the man I loved again, after mourning him as if he were dead. Arthur sat quietly, eyes fixed on the steaming cup. "I can hardly believe I'm alive to see you," he said softly. I placed my hand on his. "We still have time, Arthur, but we must use it to finish this." Across the table, Anna opened her laptop and spread out the files, photos, and recordings she and I had gathered over the past weeks. "I already sent copies of everything to Detective Grant," she said. "He will be here tonight. But we must be careful. Diana is starting to get suspicious. She has hired someone to watch this area." Arthur looked at me, his voice low. "Eleanor, I do not want you to have to see them. Let Samuel and me handle it." I shook my head. "No, Arthur. I have believed all my life that love could heal everything. But some wounds only heal when exposed to light. I will be there." That evening, Detective Grant arrived. He wore a heavy coat and carried a briefcase. The yellow lamplight fell across his tired but determined face. "I have reviewed everything," he said. "The recordings, the medical records, the insurance documents, they all match. This is premeditated murder with a clear financial motive. But we need the final proof. Something that shows Arthur did not die in an alleged machinery explosion." Arthur nodded. "I am ready to show myself if needed." Grant paused thoughtfully. "I need him to appear at exactly the right moment. If we reveal things too early, they will flee or destroy evidence. We will let them expose themselves." Anna asked, "Do you have a plan?" Grant opened his briefcase and pulled out 2 documents. "I filed an official request with the county court to reopen the investigation into Arthur Blake's death. Tomorrow morning, I will confront Dr. Harold Moore, who signed the false death report. If he admits to being bribed, everything will collapse for Diana and Lydia." I looked at him, my voice small. "And if he does not confess?" "Then we will make him confess," Grant replied. The next day, the sky was gray and it drizzled. Grant and I drove to Dr. Moore's clinic in town. Arthur remained hidden at the coastal house awaiting news. Dr. Moore greeted us with a forced smile. When Grant set the file on the table, the smile quickly faded. "You signed the death report for Arthur Blake," Grant said, his voice cold as steel. "But the original medical record lists methanol poisoning, not an industrial explosion. Explain that." Dr. Moore began to sweat, his voice trembling. "That was an administrative error. I only followed the family's instructions." "Which family?" I interrupted. He swallowed hard. "Diana Blake. She said everything was agreed with the insurance company." Grant produced a copy of the insurance contract and laid it on the table. "And in return, you accepted $5,000 as a token of gratitude, correct?" Moore did not answer. His averted eyes said everything. "I have a witness," Grant continued. "A nurse at Memorial saw Diana meet you in your office right before you signed the report. If you do not cooperate, you will face obstruction of justice and falsifying death records." Silence stretched for a moment. Then Dr. Moore sighed and put down his pen. "All right." I signed under their request. Diana said it was procedural. She handed me an envelope of money and her family lawyer's card. Grant nodded and took notes. Thank you, doctor. You just saved whatever remains of your reputation. By the afternoon, the news spread. The death of Arthur Blake was under new investigation. Diana called me that night. Her voice strained. Mother, what is happening? I heard the police are asking about father. I answered calmly. Perhaps they want to know why an alleged machinery explosion left no traces of burning. Silence. I could hear the sharp, quick breath on the other end. Mother, someone is deceiving you. They are using you to— No, Diana, I cut in. You are the one who used your parents, and I will not be silent any longer. She hung up without saying more. That evening, Anna learned from Michael that the two sisters were planning to flee the state with all the property documents they had seized. Grant immediately placed surveillance. This is the moment Arthur must come forward, he said. We will stage a family reconciliation meeting. I want Diana and Lydia to face the man they thought they had killed. 3 days later, the meeting was arranged at my house in Spring Creek. The weather was cold and the rain pelted the porch. I sat in the parlor, listening to the ticking clock in the silence. Diana and Lydia arrived on time. Both wore black coats, neat on the outside, but their eyes betrayed their tension. Why did you call us here? Diana asked. I looked directly at her. So, you can meet the man you tried to kill. She frowned and gave a brittle laugh. You have started again. We told you. The door opened. Arthur walked in. The room dropped into absolute silence. Lydia stepped back, hands trembling. Diana froze, her face draining of color, as if confronted by a ghost. Arthur spoke slowly, each word deliberate. I did not die, Diana, but perhaps the last good thing left in you has. That cannot be, she whispered. You. Methanol, Arthur said. The substance you put in your father's coffee. Diana screamed, then accused. No, that was Lydia's fault. She did it. Lydia collapsed, tears streaming. I did not want to. I only followed my sister's orders. Grant came in from the back door with 2 officers at his side. He said, flatly, Diana Blake, Lydia Blake, you are under arrest for first-degree murder and insurance fraud. The sound of handcuffs closing echoed through the room that once held so much family laughter. I turned my face away to avoid seeing more, but the tears fell anyway. Mama, Lydia called, voice breaking. Mother, I am sorry. I did not answer. In that moment, I was no longer only a mother. I was witness to the crimes of my own children. The trial took place 2 months later. The courtroom was packed. The press labeled the case the Blake case, the daughter's poison. I sat in the front row with Arthur and Anna. When the prosecutor played the final recording, the courtroom fell silent. You would not suspect, Diana's recorded voice said. Just one more spoonful and he will sleep forever. Lydia sobbed openly. Diana stared blankly. When asked if I wanted to speak, I stood. I do not seek revenge. I want the truth to be known. For the man who was a father, a husband, and a decent person to his last breath. My voice did not tremble. Only an ache reached down deep. After nearly 2 hours of deliberation, The jury returned the verdict. Diana Blake and Lydia Blake were found guilty of first-degree murder and insurance fraud. The gavel fell. I gripped Arthur's hand and felt decades of weight lift from my chest. Justice arrived not with a shout, but with the quiet of truth. That night, after everyone had left, I sat on the porch and watched the rain in the yellow lamplight. Arthur put his hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am," I replied softly, "but perhaps we will never be as we were." He nodded. "No, but at least we still have each other." I smiled. For the first time in many months, I felt peace settle in my heart. Justice does not return the past, but it makes the present cleaner. And sometimes that is all an old woman like me needs. The following spring, the town of Spring Creek returned to its usual peace. But inside me, everything had changed. The old house still stood, but laughter no longer lived there. The roses by the porch bloomed as if they didn't know how many tears had fallen onto this soil. Arthur and I lived quietly, tending vegetables and repairing the small workshop. Every morning, he still rose early, brewed coffee, and turned on the radio for the news. Sometimes I caught him sitting in silence for a long time, his eyes drifting toward the road where our daughters once left home. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" I asked. He nodded slightly. "I still wonder. If I had been firmer, maybe things would have been different." I stayed silent. Some questions don't need answers. They only lead us back to places that have already crumbled. One May morning, the mailman brought a large envelope stamped with the Oregon State Prison seal. The sender's name, Lydia Blake. I stared at the envelope for a long time. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were handwritten pages. The same familiar handwriting, now shaky and uneven. "Mother, I don't know if I should still call you that, because I don't deserve to. But I need to say this, whether you read it or not. I've lived more than 6 months in a place where time doesn't move. Every night, I hear the iron doors close and think about Father's laughter in the old kitchen. I can't sleep because, in my dreams, he still looks at me the way he did that day I made his coffee. That look, it wasn't anger, just sadness. I know my sin can't be forgiven. I won't make excuses, but I want you to know I never meant to kill him. I was weak. I was afraid. I let her pull me in, and by the time I realized, it had gone too far. I don't write this to beg for pity. I just want to say that every day I live, I remember my own stupidity. I miss the scent of roses in the garden, the family dinners, the way you used to call me every morning. I know those things are gone forever. If you can, please keep a small part of me, not to forget what I did, but to remember that I was once your daughter." I set the letter down. No tears came. They had long since dried, but something heavy and gentle stirred in my chest. Arthur came in, seeing the paper in my hand. "From Lydia?" he asked. I nodded. "She's remorseful." He sat beside me, silent for a while, then said softly, "Will you forgive her?" I looked out the window, where sunlight fell over the rose garden. "I don't know, Arthur. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. But maybe holding on to hate only makes us become like them." A week later, I wrote back, Not to justify, not to comfort, only to let Lydia know that pain can still turn into something else. Lydia, I have read your letter, and I believe you are no longer the person you were that day. Some sins cannot be washed away with tears, only redeemed through action. I don't need your apologies. I only need you to live the rest of your life with honesty. Don't run, don't lie, and if you can, help someone before they make the same mistake you did. Your father still works at the little workshop. He doesn't speak of it, but I know he's forgiven you because forgiveness for him isn't mercy. It's how he keeps the human part of himself alive. I don't hate you, Lydia. I'm just sad. But that sadness is proof that I still love you. I signed it, folded it, and sent it. When the letter left my hand, I felt lighter, as if some of the darkness had finally left our home. Months later, I heard that Lydia had joined a prison rehabilitation program, teaching illiterate women to read, helping addicts write job applications. The newspaper ran a short piece about her, calling her the remorseful inmate. I didn't keep the whole article, only the last lines, which I cut out and slipped into my notebook. I can't change the past, Lydia said in the interview, but I can choose how to live what remains. I read it again and felt a quiet, weighted peace. Arthur looked at me, half smiling, half sighing. See, Eleanor, some seeds of goodness still live, even when buried in the mud. I smiled. Maybe so, but sometimes you have to walk through hell to know who you really want to be. One autumn afternoon, I received a second letter from Lydia. Only one short line. Mother, I've been approved for the prison charity labor program. I'll donate all my wages to your and Father's foundation. I want to make amends, even just a little. I read that line over and over. Each stroke of her pen was a scar, but also a sprouting root of life. That night, Arthur and I sat on the porch. The full moon shone bright over the freshly trimmed rose garden. I told him about the letter and about the strange calm that came with it. I don't feel angry anymore, I said. Just tired and at peace, like the sea after the storm. Arthur took my hand, the moonlight reflecting off our silver hair. That's what redemption is, Eleanor. Not just theirs, but ours. We redeem ourselves for believing that love was always enough to save everything. I nodded, my eyes stinging. Maybe redemption isn't about being forgiven. It's about learning to look at your pain without hating it. He smiled faintly. And that's what you've always been best at. Turning pain into compassion. From that day on, I began writing in my journal again. Not to record grief, but to remind myself that what remains of the past, if treated gently, can still bloom. On the first page, I wrote a line Arthur once said during the trial. Justice is not meant for revenge, but to save the human soul. And perhaps, by forgiving Lydia, I had finally saved my own. 2 years had passed since the trial ended. Life in Spring Creek had returned to its ordinary rhythm. The small cafe at the end of the street still opened at 6 every morning. The mailman still made his rounds on Tuesdays, and the old market still sold melons and chrysanthemums as if nothing had ever broken. Only I knew that beneath that calm, something else was quietly being reborn, patient and steady, like a sapling growing from a tree once split by lightning. Every morning I woke before Arthur. I loved that moment when the first sunlight streamed through the window and touched the old family photograph. Michael as a boy, my two daughters with their hair tied high, all smiling brightly. I never took that photo down, not because I couldn't forget, but because I had learned that memories never disappear. They only change form. Arthur still worked in the workshop. He had turned the place that once held tragedy into a small woodworking studio that restored broken furniture. He often said, "Things that are damaged aren't meant to be thrown away, Eleanor. They just need a patient hand." And I knew he was speaking of far more than wood. That June, I received the final letter from Lydia. It was short, simple, stripped of self-pity. Just a few lines. "Mother, I'll soon be transferred to a semi-freedom program. I've written a proposal to join Father's Charity Foundation. I want to work, even in silence." I read it and smiled. For the first time since everything began, I felt real joy. Not loud, not blinding, a quiet warmth like sunlight falling softly on my shoulders. That very day, Arthur sat with me on the porch and said, "Eleanor, I think we should do something for people who've been through what we have." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "A foundation. Not big, but enough to help those betrayed by their own. Those abused, deceived, abandoned. We survived, didn't we? So, let's help others survive, in their own way." I looked out to the garden. The roses were blooming. "The Arthur Blake Foundation," I whispered. "Not a bad name." Arthur smiled, that gentle smile I'd loved since I was 24. "I think you should be the one to lead it. I just want to help people fix what's been broken." 3 months later, the Arthur Blake Foundation was officially born in our small Spring Creek home. No banners, no noise, just a few old friends, some local reporters, and survivors of family violence. I gave a short speech. This foundation wasn't created to recall a crime, but to prove that from guilt, compassion can still grow. When I finished, the applause wasn't loud, but it lasted a long time. Anna sat in the front row, tears shining in her eyes. She was the one who had helped us reclaim life, truth, and faith in goodness itself. And in the back row, I saw a woman in a gray prison uniform, escorted by 2 guards. Lydia. Our eyes met. No fear, no pleading, only a strange calm, as if she had finally accepted her guilt and chosen to begin again. After the ceremony, she approached me quietly. "Mother, thank you for still keeping the Blake name." I held her hand and said nothing. Between us, silence was no longer distance. It was understanding. That first year, the foundation helped only 3 families: a woman escaping an abusive husband, a boy orphaned by domestic violence, and an old man whose children had stolen his property. Each time we helped someone, I saw Arthur smile. He was no longer a man betrayed. He was someone who had turned his wounds into shelter for other broken souls. In the second autumn, Michael and Anna visited, bringing a small bronze plaque engraved with Arthur's words. "In memory of love that endured the storm, for every soul betrayed yet brave enough to forgive." I stood before it for a long time. Arthur squeezed my hand and said softly, "You know, Eleanor, maybe this is what I was waiting for. Not revenge, but continuation." I nodded, tears blurring my eyes. "We've come a long way, Arthur." Time passed. My hair turned white, but every morning I still went to the garden to cut roses and lay them before the bronze plaque. The papers began writing about our foundation, calling me the widow who forgave. I never saw myself as extraordinary. I was simply a woman who refused to let another's darkness become her own. One March morning, I received word that Lydia would be released early for good behavior. She didn't return to town. She only sent a brief note. "Mother, I'm going somewhere new to start over. But wherever I go, I'll live as you taught me, honest and kind. If you allow it, I want to donate half of what I earn to the Arthur Blake Foundation, as I promised." I read it and smiled. "Go, my daughter," I whispered. "The world still has room for those who repent." Now, each evening, as I sit on the porch listening to the wind through the rose garden, I think about the road behind me, from betrayal to humiliation, to revenge, to justice, to redemption, and finally, renewal. A complete circle, its edges worn smooth. Arthur often said he could still hear me crying on that first night after the false funeral. I told him, "Not anymore. Those tears have turned into flowers." And indeed, the roses bloomed brighter than ever that year. Deep red like hearts, but fragrant and light as the first morning after a storm. I wrote the final line in my journal. Some losses can never be restored, but they can become light to guide others. Forgiveness doesn't make us weak. It gives us the strength to go on without carrying the darkness. And when the heart learns to be at peace, that is the moment of true rebirth. Outside, the sun was setting. Arthur called me to the porch for tea. The sound of distant waves drifted in, soft as the whisper of time. I stepped out, holding my warm cup, and smiled at him. In that moment, I understood. Justice had been served. Love had been redeemed. And life, though once shattered, could begin again. And you. If one day you discovered that the person you trusted and loved the most had been betrayed by their own family, would you choose revenge or forgiveness to find peace within yourself again? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Share them with me in the comments. I read every word because sometimes one small story from you can warm my heart. Thank you for listening to my story today. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your life walking with me through a journey of tears, truth, and compassion. And you know what? There are still many more stories waiting for you here. Stories about love, respect, and the ways people learn to begin again. Thank you. You, the one hearing my voice right now. I wish you a peaceful night, and may you always keep kindness alive in your heart, no matter how much life takes away. Please subscribe and watch the next video on my channel.